Salvete discipuli. First off, yes, I got a haircut. In this video lesson, we will explore the first story of stage 15, where you can start putting together your knowledge of the relative pronouns, and also we are going to experience again some of the irregular verbs. Okay, so let's take a look at our story. Again, what we're going to see in this story are examples in a narrative of the use of relative pronouns and clauses. We are also going to see irregular verbs, and I have supplied again in your lesson videos dedicated to those for your review. Salvius et Quintus ad aulam cum multis servis procedebant. Salvius and Quintus were processing to the palace with many slaves. Now, you could also translate this verb as proceeding, but this is a solemn occasion, and they're going to the palace because it's the birthday of King Cogidubnus. So processing or proceeding are possible translations there. Worth noting again, multis servis, those are ablative plurals because cum as a preposition always takes ablative. Agmen erat splendidum. The line was splendid. Now, an agmen is a line of people. This is a neuter noun. Many of the neuters we've seen and in like donum, and remember that neuters have the same form for both nominative and accusative. So in this case, agmen is nominative, but the adjective that goes with a neuter noun is going to have that neuter-looking ending, um. In prima parte, decem servi ibant. In the first part, 10 slaves were going. Okay, so here's one of our irregular verbs, and you'll want to watch the video on this verb. This is the verb eo, to go. And in the imperfect, basically only this I is like the stem of the verb, meaning to go, and then you have the regular bombas bat, bamus batis, bant ending here. So 10 slaves were going. Hi servi erant praecursores. These slaves were forerunners. Now, what this means is out ahead of the group, there are these slaves, and they're going to basically be trying to keep the road clean. So anybody who's in the way, they're going to they actually have sticks, we're going to see in a minute, and they're supposed to knock them off the road because no Romans are ever supposed to be impeded when they are moving on a Roman-built road. Virgas longas tenebant. They were holding long staves. Now, stave is the plural of staff, okay? So a long staff. So picture Gandalf the wizard in Lord of the Rings, like he's got this long staff. It's something like that. These aren't like wizard staffs. These are like big staffs. In medio agmine, Salvius et Quintus equitabant. In the middle of the line, Salvius and Quintus were riding horses. Look at this. It's an entire verb that means to ride a horse. In English, we don't have a verb that means to ride a horse. We ride a car, you can ride in a wagon, you can ride a horse. But in Latin, there's an entire verb that just means to ride a horse. Ancilla, comma, quae post salvium ambulabat, comma, urnam portabat. Now, there's a reason I actually read those commas out loud. I want you to get used to seeing commas as your friends, especially when you need to figure out where the actual clauses might be. In this case, this is a relative clause. The actual sentence is everything outside of those parentheses. And so the actual sentence here is a slave girl was carrying an urn. And the relative clause here just tells you more about that ankila. So it is a slave girl who, quai. Now it's quai because the word it's referring to is feminine, okay? So feminine relative nominative because this quai is actually the subject of the verb ambulabat. So it is a slave girl who was walking behind Salvius. A slave girl was carrying an urn. Servus qui post quintum ambulabat tripodas portabat. Okay, again, I'm going to put parentheses around this relative clause because the actual sentence here is that a slave was carrying a tripod. And the qui here is telling us more about the servus. Servus is masculine, and so we have the masculine nominative singular relative, and the qui is the subject of ambulabat. The slave, comma, who was walking behind Quintus, comma, was carrying a tripod. Aliae ancillae flores et unguentum ferebant. Other slave girls were bearing flowers and ointment. Viginti servi cum puellis ibant. 20 slaves were going with the girls. Agmen splendidum totam viam complebat. The splendid line was filling the whole street. Britanni quoque multi ad aulam ibant. Many British also were going to the palace. Uxores liberosque secum ducebant. They were leading wives and children with them. Remember, in all of Book 1, we only had the word et that meant and. Now we have also picked up a knowledge of this thing que. Que is put on the back of the second item in a list. So in this case, you almost want to think of the que logically as going here, okay? So if this had instead been uxores et liberos, then it would have been wives and children. Another way to say that in Latin is uxores liberosque. This is a weird word, by the way. Liberos is what we call a defective noun. There is no singular of it, okay? So unlike English, where there is a singular word child, Latin does not have a singular word child. They have a plural word, which means children. Liberos here is the accusative plural of it. If you say just, you would have to say puer or puella, just a boy or a girl. But there's actually not a neutral term that means just a child. Very interesting. Magna turba erat in via. A great crowd was in the street. Tum varica qui cum praecursoribus equitabat ad Salvius rediit. Then Varica, who was riding a horse with the forerunners, returned to Salvius. Now, even though his name ends with an A, he's a man, and this is a masculine, and that is why we have qui. Now, this verb rediit, okay, this is a compound from that same irregular verb we've been seeing in the form ibant and ibat together. And this means like to go back, so literally to return, rediit, that's the past tense of it. Domine, inquit, difficile est nobis procedere. Master, he said, it is difficult for us to proceed. And we're also reviewing this sentence structure, difficile est, so many different variations. Facile est means it is easy, decorum est means it is proper, etc. And it always takes a dative. It is difficult for somebody to do something. So in this case, difficile est nobis procedere. It is difficult for us to proceed. Quod he Britanni viam complent, because these British are filling the road. E via exire nolunt. They don't want to exit from the street. And here we have the irregular verb nolo means to not want, and this is the third person plural present tense of it. They don't want, and then you always need an infinitive to complete the action. And remember, our infinitives, we recognize them because they end with an re. Quid facere debeo? What should I do? Now remember, this verb debeo, it can mean to owe money, okay? Spanish still has the exact same verb. But it can also mean ought or should do something. And again, it completes its action with an infinitive. And there's the re. Quid facere debeo? What should I do? Salvius iratus ei dixit. Salvius, angry, said to him. Now, iratus is an adjective describing the emotional state of Salvius. But when you have iratus in a sentence with like a verb of speaking, it's very natural. Go ahead and turn it into an adverb. And so you could say angrily said to him. Necessa est praecursoribus Britannos evia emovere. It is necessary for the forerunners to remove the British from the street. Non decorum est Britannis cives Romanos impedere. It is not fitting for British to impede Roman citizens. Remember, the Romans built these roads, okay? Romans did such a great job building roads that, believe it or not, there are still some stretches of Roman roads being used today. The Appian Way, which goes from Rome, there is a stretch of it which basically still is the ancient Roman road, and it's being used still today. There's cars driving on what is a Roman road. Many roads in Britain, even though they're not the original Roman road, they are in the exact same place that an original Roman road once stretched. Because once the Romans built a great road, people just kind of understood that, that's where you're going to continue to repair a road. And so many highways in Britain today are still the exact route of an original Roman road. Ego quam celerime ire volo, quod rex nos expectat. I want to go as quickly as possible because the king is expecting us. So again, here's another irregular verb. I want. What do I want to do? Here's the infinitive of that verb to go. I want to go. When you have what we call a superlative adverb here, celerime means very quickly. When you put quam before a superlative adverb like that, it takes on the meaning of as blank as possible. So in this case, as quickly as possible.